everyone, welcome back to Alice and the Giant Bookshelf. Today's video is my March wrap-up. Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel, or welcome if you are new. My name's Alice and I have way too many books. Today we're going to be talking all about all of the books that I read in March. And the results of the BookTube Prize finally came out last week, so I can even give you a word or two on the books that I read for that. When I made my TBR for March, it was even more over ambitious than my usual TBRs. I was participating in way too many readathons. As a result, I think I had a very good start to the month and then a drop off in the amount that I was reading towards the end of the month. So I didn't get anywhere near the amount of books read that I had hoped, which is a shame, but here we go. It still won't stop me making overly ambitious TBRs in the future. In March, I read a total of 11 books, and 2 of those were audiobooks. One of them was an ebook, and the rest were all physical books. Storygraph says that that is a total of 5,106 pages. So, lots of pages in March. I thought I'd better say first of all which books I didn't read from my giant list that I gave you. So I didn't read Bring Up the Bodies yet, but I included that in my April TBR because I am going to be reading that in the month of April. From the rest of my TBR, I also failed to read The Mousetrap. I did pick this up at some point in the month and I started it and I thought I really am not in the mood to read play scripts, so I stopped. For March Mystery Madness, I also did not manage to get to my Dick Francis book, Second Wind, Josephine Tay book, Brat Farah, the Michael White book, The Art of Murder, and I think I also showed in that TBR Ruth Rendell's The Secret House of Death. I didn't get to any of those, and I also didn't get to one of the longest serving books on my TBR, which I was hoping to read for middle grade March, which was Memory by Margaret Mahy. I'm really going to try and squeeze this in this month or next if I can, because it was on my list of books that I would have to unhaul if I didn't read them within 12 months. There are 3 other books that I've started and not finished in March. Well, I didn't start this one in March because I've been reading it since last June, but I did not finish Don Quixote, surprisingly. I have only actually managed about 8 chapters of this month, which is a shame because I am reading it with a group hosted by Roz at Scally Dandling About the Books, and I've managed to fall well behind that group, so I'll try and catch up a bit in April. I'm really hoping to finish it, but I haven't yet. My second book that I've still got on the go is Those Bones Are Not My Child by Toni, Cade, Bambara. I was reading this for AJ Dunn's Killer Reads Thriller Month book club, and it's a really heavy book. I am about halfway through. I am going to persevere, but I have put it down for a little while because it just got a bit overwhelming, to be honest. So that's slightly on hold, but I am going to try and finish it in April as well. And thirdly, another confession time. I actually bought this one in March from a charity shop because I read the first in this series for middle grade March and I really liked it. I found that the trilogy is a little bit hard to find, so I started looking out for it and I managed to get this one in Oxfam Books for £1.29, so I was pleased with that bargain. Unfortunately, this has added to the TBR but is not yet finished. I've read about a quarter of this book. Hopefully I will get The Raven's Knot by Robin Jarvis finished in April. I'm still working on this one. So on to what I did read. Because I was doing so many different readathons and things, the books kind of naturally grouped themselves into groups, so I'm not going to go from least favourite to most favourite this month, but I will tell you that I would rate them as good, very good, or a favourite of the month when I get to them. So let's start with books that didn't really belong in any of the readathons. We have My Cousin Rachel by Daphne du Maurier, and this was the first book I read this month. It was actually left over from February, so I got this finished early on in March, and I've already talked about this in my mid-month wrap-up, but I really enjoyed this. I didn't enjoy it as much as Rebecca, but it's very suspenseful and very enjoyable, and I'm definitely going to read more Daphne du Maurier. I would say that this is a very good book, but it's not quite going to make it into my favourites of the month. The second book that doesn't really fit into any of the readathons or anything is What I Loved by Siri Hustvedt. I read this one as a buddy read with Sandy from Ms. Reads a Lot. If you haven't checked out Sandy's brilliant channel yet, I urge you to do so, and you can find the link below. What I Loved is a strange sort of story about, I believe he's an art historian. Leo, the main character, becomes great friends with this artist called Bill, and yeah, this is a story about I suppose their family, and there's a lot in it about art, there's a lot in it about love and loss, and it was a really enjoyable book. It was great as a buddy read, and I would put this as a very good book, but it didn't have maybe as much of a story as some other books do, but I would rate it very good. The third book that I read that was not in any particular readathon was an audiobook, and that was The Blade Itself by Jo Abercrombie. I really loved The Blade Itself. I've been listening to it for a couple of months now, and this was recommended to me by Jack at Spread Bookjoy and Gemma at Gem of Books, and they both gave me this recommendation when I was looking for a sort of accessible fantasy. I'm not very good at reading fantasy, and I really wanted to try some, and they recommended me this, and I loved the audiobook. This was narrated by, I believe his name was Stephen Pacey, and he did an excellent job. The characters in this book just make it. It's got fantastic characters. My absolute top favourite, and probably a favourite character of all time, was called Inquisitor Glocta, and he's just such a well-drawn, interesting character whose inner voice we get to hear, as well as his sort of outer voice, I suppose. It also has another great character called Logan, or Nine Fingers, the Bloody Nine, and it follows those two characters and some others. There's also a character who came into this a bit later called Pharaoh, and she is hilarious, so I really enjoyed her appearances as well. A brilliant start to what I believe is a trilogy. I'm hoping to read the other books with Gemma and Jack. Yeah, I'm going to give that one a favourite of the month. It was really good. Okay, so we've covered March of the Mammoths, that's Don Quixote. Obviously I didn't succeed very well with that. It continues on into April. Let's talk about the BookTube Prize next. I've got a whole vlog style video talking about each of the books that I read for the BookTube Prize, but I did read two of them in March, and one of them was The Fortune Men, which is a book that I did really enjoy in places, but in other places I found it dragged, and this wasn't my favourite that I had to read for the prize, but it did have a really powerful ending, and it just wasn't completely to my taste, but I would say this is a good book. The author does a really good job of bringing the era and the area of the UK to life that she writes about, but there were parts of the book where I was a bit bored. The other book I read in March for the BookTube Prize was, of course, Cloud Cuckoo Land, which I now have over there on my shelf. This was my absolute favourite read from the BookTube Prize, and it was also my favourite book of the year so far. If you're thinking about reading Cloud Cuckoo Land and you're not sure, give it a try. It really will hopefully amaze you. It definitely amazed me. I've had to get my own copy of it because I had a library book and I had to go back. And yeah, I can't rate this book highly enough. It's definitely a new favourite of the year, possibly a new favourite of all time. So high praise indeed, and I'm definitely giving that my top favourite of the month. We've got two more readathons that I participated in to mention, and the first of those is March Mystery Madness. So I read a lot less for March Mystery Madness than I was hoping, and the books that I got finished were From My Giant TBR, Agatha Raisin, There Goes the Bride, I've already talked about this in another video. It's the 20th book in the Agatha Raisin series by MC Beaton, and I'm really glad to be done with all of the books that I bought from this series. I'm not sure if I'll be buying any more because I am fed up with the main character now, but I think I've talked about this book too much already, so I would rate this okay. Secondly, I reread, and this was my one reread of the month, Killing Floor by Lee Child. I reread it to compare it to the Jack Reacher series that came out on Amazon Prime recently, and I still really love this book. It's a brilliant thriller. I've talked about it many times elsewhere, so I'm not going to go on about it here, but this was definitely a favourite of the month as well. If you can put a reread in favourite of the month, then I will. The final book that I read for March Mystery Madness, as it turned out, was The Breaking Point by Mary Roberts Rinehart. I read this for a read-along that was hosted by Janelle over at Too Fond of Books. I'll link her brilliant channel in the description down below. If you love mysteries, you should definitely be subscribed to Janelle. We read this book and I think a lot of us were certainly initially disappointed with it. I actually, looking back on it, think that I should have DNF'd this book and read something else because I have quite a bit of regret over not getting through some of my giant TBR. I read this as an ebook, and I've spoken a lot of times about how I don't really DNF books, especially books with a mystery element. I end up thinking, oh, I need to know the answer to this mystery, so I carry on reading even when I'm not enjoying it at all. And unfortunately, I think that the solution to this book didn't really justify reading it. I will try another Mary Roberts Rinehart because I've heard that her whodunits are very good, but this wasn't really a whodunit. There was actually barely any mystery to it, and I kept reading because I was very mildly intrigued. I won't be making that mistake again. I've got to learn to DNF books. I would give The Breaking Point okay, but only because it had a passable twist. But I really didn't care about any of the characters, and there's a romance in it which I really didn't care about, so yeah, it didn't go well with that book. So finally we come to middle grade March. For middle grade March I read The Woven Path by Robin Jarvis, and this is the first book in the Tales from the Weird Museum series, and I really enjoyed this. I spoke about it in my earlier mid-month wrap-up, and I'm going to, in hindsight, put this in very good. There's a great time travelling element. There are really enjoyable characters in this one, but I'm now reading the second one in the trilogy, which I mentioned acquiring, and I'm not enjoying it as much. Unfortunately, I don't know if this book is going to be the high point of the trilogy. I'm hoping it will get better, but I'm not enjoying the second book as much at the moment. So hopefully that will come good and we'll get some more from characters that I enjoyed in this one. But yes, this one I would actually say can easily be read as a standalone. I really enjoyed reading this for middle grade March. And as you can tell, it encouraged me to go out and buy another book. Secondly, for middle grade March, I read Anne of the Island by L.M. Montgomery. I don't think I've talked about this one anywhere else, but I really enjoyed Anne's fourth book, and she went off to college in this one. I won't give any other plot details because of too many spoilers for the series. I'm reading these with the Analong hosted by Emily at Novelle Novels, and I'll link all the details down below if you want to join that group. We're reading one Anne of Green Gables book per month. Yeah, Anne of the Island. I didn't enjoy this as much as the other two, and there was a big reason for this, and there was a part in the middle where I felt that Anne had really lost some of the character elements that I really enjoyed about the first two books. This is the third book in Anne of Green Gables series. I don't know why I said it was the fourth. There was a bit in the middle where I felt like she lost some of the character elements I really loved. There was a bit that almost made me stop reading it because of a bit of an incident with a cat, but I'm not going to spoil her that. But I found that bit very disappointing. And yeah, it got back on track in the end. It still has some of the feel-good elements of the Anne series, but it's not my favourite in the series so far. I'll put this in the very good category. And finally, for middle grade March, I read another audiobook, and it was the audiobook of Coraline by Neil Gaiman. I haven't read any books by Neil Gaiman before, apart from one of his children's picture books, but I loved Coraline. It was so creepy, and I felt I had to read this after watching Jack from Spread Book Joy's video about why adults read middle grade. And in this she talked about how Neil Gaiman wasn't sure whether Coraline would be marketed as a children's book, and how it ended up getting marketed as such because of a lie that his publicist's daughter told. So if you want to know more about that story, go over to Jack's channel and watch her fantastic book about why adults read middle grade. I'll link that in the description box down below for you to go and see. So this inspired me to immediately pick up Coraline, and I got the audiobook on Libby, my library app, and I also alongside it got the ebook so that I could see the pictures that were in it. So I did a bit of both, but mostly listened to it, and it was read by Neil Gaiman himself, who was a great narrator for it. And this is a really sort of creepy children's book that will absolutely put you on edge and keep you guessing as to how Coraline is going to get out of the situation in which she finds herself. I haven't seen the film of the same name, but I will undoubtedly go on to look out for that as well. And I had a great time with Coraline and managed to listen to it in a day, so I would definitely recommend Coraline, and I would put that as one of my favourites of the month. So this month, as we rarely do, we've had 2 favourites of the month that are audiobooks, and 1 favourite of the month that is a physical book, which is Cloud Cuckoo Land. We've come to the part of the video where I've got to talk about my giant TBR. And you would have seen my haul video where I hauled 3 new books, including Julia and the Shark. And I also have since hauled a copy of Cloud Cuckoo Land, but I've already read that, so it doesn't go onto the TBR. And I have hauled this secondhand Robin Jarvis book. In total, I hauled 4 books. And in total from the giant TBR, I have read 5 books. They were Anne of the Island, Agatha Ray's and There Goes the Bride, The Woven Path, My Cousin Rachel, and What I Loved. Unfortunately, because I read 5 but bought 4, I only get to take 1 off the giant TBR number. At the end of last month, that was at 190, so it's now at 189. So the giant TBR is going down a lot more slowly than I hoped. I was hoping that April would be a time to catch up on my TBR a bit, but I do seem to have a lot of books out of the library, a lot of books that I'm planning to read on audio. Definitely try not to haul many books. It hasn't gone up, so that's positive. Yeah, let's hope that I can get some more read and get that TBR down a bit. Anyway, I hope you've really enjoyed the books that you read in March, and if you've got any new favourites, please do let me know in the comments down below. I'd love to hear from you. If you've enjoyed this video today, please give it a like. Please consider subscribing if you haven't already. I'm looking forward to a month of participating in fewer readathons and just calming down a bit on that front. Thanks for watching, and I hope to see you all again soon for another video all about books here on Alice and the Giant Bookshelf. Bye for now.